everybody. It is 10 years since I received my formal autism diagnosis, so I wanted to make a quick video speaking about how autism impacts me now as an adult 10 years after identification. 14th of April 2015 was when I received my diagnosis. It is now April 2025, and as a child my main autism traits were really lining up toys, lots of stimming, like constant sort of hand wringing, hand flapping, jumping up and down, rocking back and forth. I still rock back and forth a lot. As a child as well, quite intense special interests in obscure kind of areas. But as an adult, I actually think my social difficulties have increased in a way, because as you get older, social demands increase, the expectations of you increase, and as an autistic adult, I can't keep up with that. So what does social interaction feel like for me as an autistic adult? It's interesting because, you're watching me here speaking, you might think I don't have that many social difficulties, but the reality is, although I can verbally communicate, I am beyond awkward in social situations. One of my biggest issues is not knowing when I can speak. This makes two-way conversations incredibly difficult, because sometimes I'll kind of interrupt without meaning to and then repeatedly apologise because I thought it was my turn to speak and it wasn't. So that just makes me really kind of nervous in social situations, because I never want to come off as rude. I'm always afraid, what if I come off that way, because I just don't always know when is the right time to speak. It's like if I have an idea pop into my head, do I say it or do I not? Sometimes I'll say it and realise that I've said it at the wrong time, but then if I leave it too long I will forget. And that's actually often part of ADHD. I'm not sure if I have ADHD. A lot of people seem to think I might, so I might do. But yeah, just knowing when to speak, I'm not good at that and I hate it so much. Volume control is also a huge issue for me. I feel like such a terrible person sometimes because people ask me to be quiet because I don't realise how loud I'm actually speaking. It's kind of like, because when there's a lot of background noise I speak louder because I feel like I can't hear myself, so I assume other people can't hear me, but it turns out I just have auditory processing issues, so the sounds around me kind of seem louder than they actually are. Sometimes people will point out that I'm talking way too loud and I'll just feel like a terrible person because I realise that I am just being irritating. This is a huge issue actually in open floor plan, open space areas. For example, when I was at the job centre, there were lots of different desks in one room. There weren't separate offices to go into, and I was trying to speak, but they said I was being too loud and distracting everyone else, which I felt really horrible because I obviously didn't mean to. It's just because when there's so much noise around me, I assume that no one can hear me because I can't hear myself. Turns out, no, my auditory processing is just way off. Another thing as well is I can read body language and facial expression. In fact, I'm actually said to be better than most neurotypicals at reading facial expressions and stuff, but I still worry in social situations that I'm coming off the wrong way, because I'm like, what if neurotypicals can read me in a way that I can't? What if I'm accidentally doing sort of body language that makes me look like a serial killer or something? Obviously I'm not, but what if I'm doing a body language or facial expression that comes off the wrong way and other people are looking at me and judging me and thinking, oh, what a terrible person, they're clearly hiding some dark secret, and then I'm just there this is just my normal body language. For some reason I've always been afraid of that, because I am not fully aware of how my body language comes across. I always just assume that people are thinking the worst, and assuming that I'm some terrible person. It's really weird. That might sound like social anxiety, but I wouldn't say I have social anxiety because I'm actually quite confident in social situations, but it's just because I know that I have a disorder that affects my ability to understand body language and facial expression. I doubt myself a lot, and I doubt how I'm coming across. I doubt that I'm actually doing body language and facial expressions correctly, because when I was a kid, I never knew how to smile naturally in photos. I would always look really bizarre when I was told to smile, because if someone just told me to smile I would just go, because I didn't know how to do it in a normal way. So that's why I'm always really self-conscious about my body language and facial expressions. I actually am really over the top in my body language sometimes. In my videos you'll probably see me doing loads of hand gestures. I actually find that helps me communicate though. Another issue I have is I can't really initiate conversation with people. They have to initiate it with me, because if I'm in a group setting I will just sit there and listen. Sometimes I'll join in, but other times I'll just feel really awkward and I need someone to ask me a question directly for me to reply, because it's like I don't know when to come into the conversation. I'm just so awkward, really. I need assistance when I go out in public. Like, I don't go out in public alone, partially because, you know, I am an ambulatory wheelchair user, and a lot of the time I'm actually too weak to wheel myself, so I need someone to come with me and wheel me along. I should get an electric wheelchair, but they're really expensive. So it's difficult though as well, because I have to have someone come with me just to offer some sort of social support, because I will not engage with people if I'm alone. Like, I know that once, literally just once, I tried to have a bit of a conversation with a cashier in a shop, and it felt like I was acting, so I was like, how are you? And it's so unnatural to me to just start a conversation. It felt like I was acting. It always does. Like, if I'm trying to mask, if I'm trying to interact in a typical way, I feel like I'm acting, and it's really awkward. I just feel awkward all the time. And I find it so funny because, like, when I am with friends, either on a video call or in person, I do seem really awkward. People have told me that I seem so much more autistic in person than I do in real life. So much more autistic in person than I do online, even. Because I think that's because, like, when I'm online, I'm alone. I can retake as much as I need, and it's scripted to an extent. But when I'm actually in real life social situations, it's not scripted. I don't know what to expect. So I do seem really aloof in real life social situations, but also in real life social situations, you know, the lights are brighter. Like, right now I'm actually filming outdoors, but in a shaded area. I'm not always in a shaded area. When I'm out, like, under fluorescent lights, or when it's really, really bright, I seem a bit aloof because I get brain fog when exposed to really bright or fluorescent lights. I just can't do anything. Like, I literally become so disoriented and aloof because my brain can't process the light, which is why I'm getting an Erlen assessment soon to try and get Erlen lenses, because I think they would really, really help me. I already use an overlay for reading, and that's very helpful, but yeah, I will make another video about that at some point when I've actually had that assessment and everything. But that's another thing as well. Like, I think the reason I seem more autistic in person is just because I'm unable to process the lighting or other sensory input. And obviously when I'm filming videos, I'm in a space where I'm more comfortable, but in real life social situations, I can't always guarantee that I'm going to be in a space where I'm fully comfortable. So I do seem very aloof, disoriented, brain fogged and all of that. Unfortunately, executive dysfunction is a huge issue for me. Also, I think elements of demand avoidance. For example, little tiny things can feel huge to me. Because I'm chronically ill, I have to take medication and supplements 3 times a day, and just taking it 3 times a day is sometimes a huge challenge. I was prescribed a trial of sodium chromoglycate, which is something I have to take 4 times a day, but I ended up quitting that just because I couldn't bring myself to take it 4 times a day. It was so strange. But when I am pressured to do something multiple times a day, it feels like a huge task. It can take me hours to motivate myself just to take 1 dose. By that time, it's time for the next dose. And it's wild because most people can just get up and do it, and I can't. It literally takes me hours to motivate myself to do the most basic thing. And that's also why I've had issues with brushing my teeth and stuff, because it takes me so long to be able to motivate myself to do the most basic thing. The thing that gets me to actually brush my teeth is when it just becomes so uncomfortable that it's causing sensory distress that I have to brush them then to get rid of that sensory distress. And I know a lot of people would be very judgmental by that and think, oh, you're disgusting, you're lazy, or whatever. But the reality is that I try and do stuff, but it takes me hours to motivate myself to do the most basic things. And what's difficult is when I get up in the morning, I have to do it all again, and it's just like I'm facing the day and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to do all this stuff again. It felt like such an achievement yesterday doing those basic things, and now I've got to do it all again. Unfortunately, like, some people in the autism community are really judgmental about stuff like that. My friend was literally ridiculed in an autism group about their executive dysfunction impacting hygiene and stuff, and it's really frustrating because, you know, if you're only gonna support autistic people who, you know, have shiny autism or like lower support needs, then you don't really support autistic people. It's really frustrating though, because, like, I know my experiences as an autistic person aren't as intense as some people's, definitely, but I do sometimes get a bit frustrated when people call me high functioning, because I literally can't function. That's the funny thing. I don't know how to function as a normal person. I've never had a full-time job. I It's thought that I might not be able to live independently because I am so absent-minded. That's part of the reason why I hope to get an ADHD assessment, because literally my absent-mindedness is so intense it puts me in danger if I was to live alone, because I have filled the house with smoke because I forget to take food out if I'm attempting to cook. And that's why I need supervision when cooking now, because I literally would try and cook in the past when I was like 18 and it went terribly wrong because I'd fill the house with smoke. And also with my tics, I'm not really good with knives, and it's very difficult to prepare a meal sometimes without knives. So yeah, and also because I have like lost the key to the front door before and stuff, and it's thought that I won't be able to live independently, but that is less to do with autism and more to do with possible undiagnosed ADHD. But that's a difficulty as well I face as a neurodivergent adult in general. That's the thing, autism does often co-occur with other things, so sometimes difficulties might not be from autism itself, but from a co-occurring issue. And that's something that really frustrated me, that was always ignored. Like when I was a kid, especially when I was like 12 and 13, all of my difficulties were just put down to autism, because that's when I was first diagnosed. But it actually wasn't all autism. I think it's wrong to just assume that everything is part of autism when autistic people are more likely to have co-occurring issues. It caused so much neglect, like medical neglect, because it made it harder to actually get a diagnosis of Tourette syndrome, which was my main condition back then. It was the main thing that was actually impacting me. And like when I received my autism diagnosis, I actually felt kind of confused, and it didn't explain everything for me. Like that's why when I see people in the autism community saying that their autism diagnosis literally explained everything and their life got so much better afterwards, I feel a little bit jealous. Like obviously I'm happy for them, but I always feel a little bit jealous because I don't think I ever had that. Because unfortunately my autism diagnosis was really just used by doctors to like gaslight me and dismiss my other concerns, so it didn't explain everything. And I would be told, oh, you're severe tics because you're autistic. I was like, autism doesn't cause severe tics, especially not like 50 different tics. They would tell me that my involuntary laughing episodes are because I'm autistic and lack empathy, but it was absolutely nothing to do with that. It was just a neurologically misfired signal. So I never felt like my autism diagnosis was that transformative. It was more just frustrating. It stopped me from being listened to because everyone would just assume it's all autism. That's why it took me so much longer to get a Tourette's diagnosis, because that was the diagnosis that actually explained everything, like the severe tics, the OCD, the rages, the disinhibition. That was the transformative one. That being said, though, I am grateful that I received an autism diagnosis, because at least, I grew up with the understanding as to why I am socially awkward, why I rock back and forth so much, why I have obscure interests. It's so difficult for me to celebrate my autism diagnosis though, because as I said, it just led to confusion for a long time and, medical neglect. A lot of people in the autism community say that their autism diagnosis saved their lives, and I am so happy for them, but I feel like I experienced the opposite, where my autism diagnosis nearly cost me my life. Because unfortunately, there's a lot of doctors that when they see autism on your file, they just assume that everything's part of that, and that was an issue when I was really, really ill. The video basically I made just before this, I spoke about that, but basically my severe neurological symptoms and other symptoms as well, like affecting my cardiac system, affecting my guts, they were all put down to autism, and I literally felt like I was going to die due to that. And if I hadn't gone outside of the conventional system and looked for answers myself, I probably wouldn't be alive right now. So that actually led to so much fear and so much difficulty accepting my autism diagnosis, because my autism became the very thing that nearly cost me my life, the very thing that caused one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, where doctors just weren't listening to me. And it's the same though when I was younger with PANS. Like my PANS symptoms were always put down to autism. People would say, like doctors would say, oh, your inability to dress yourself, your inability to walk upstairs in your home, your severe rages, your personality change, it's all autism, but it was actually brain inflammation. So I hate that my autism diagnosis was used by doctors to just water everything down and say, oh, it's just a different way of being, when it was actually a medical condition that they refused to look into. And yeah, it was absolutely horrifying, honestly, to just be constantly disbelieved, dismissed and gaslit just because I'm autistic. That actually caused a lot of trauma. I can't watch autism TikTok videos anymore, and I can't follow autism accounts on Instagram because it's just too triggering for me. It puts me into a state of fight or flight for days, because when they say, I saw a TikTok, for example, where they were saying that they believe that OCD, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia are all just presentations of autism and ADHD, that really triggered me, because that sort of attitude led to the medical neglect I faced. I wanted people to understand that not everything was a part of autism, and that saying it was meant that I couldn't get the understanding of myself and treatment that I needed. So it's really frustrating when I see so many people think that kind of thing, because my OCD was completely separate from my autism. It was caused by brain inflammation. It wasn't part of my autism. And you know, my schizophrenia runs in my family. That's not autism. That was horrendous. They would literally scream because they thought the people on the TV were talking about them. And you know, seeing as they didn't have autistic traits as a child, they were not autistic. And I know that you can mask as a child, but like, you would usually have at least some signs, you know, as a toddler that you can notice. They're not autistic. I don't think it's right to say that everything is part of autism. And the thing is, like, it really frustrates me as well, because most autism advocates will say that meltdowns are always triggered by lack of accommodations and social factors, and often the parents get the blame, which I hate, because throughout my childhood my parents were repeatedly blamed and it was never their fault. They were accused of being bad parents when they weren't. My meltdowns usually had a biological trigger, which is something that most autism advocates ignore, and it's so frustrating. My meltdowns as a kid were triggered by food dye sensitivity, because food dyes have been shown to increase hyperactivity in the brain. That's why most of them were banned in, I think, 2009 in the UK, which was good for me. I was so happy. Like, I was so young then, but I was so happy because I didn't have to worry so much anymore, because I found out about the food dye sensitivity when I was just 3 years old. So, you know, it's frustrating that that kind of stuff is ignored, because that increase in hyperactivity in the brain can come out as meltdowns because your body doesn't have any other way to release it. And another thing is, my meltdowns as well when I was older were triggered by gut issues. Like, my gut was so bloated that I could not breathe. When I couldn't breathe, I was doing short breaths in and short breaths out, because that's all I could do. My lungs physically couldn't expand more. That put me into a state of fight or flight, which would trigger meltdowns. I also have an issue where I don't get possibly don't get enough glucose to my brain, and I don't get enough cellular energy to my brain, and that's, you know, that caused me to, at 18 years old, like, roll around on the floor, crying, bang my head against walls, severe meltdowns that would be solved after I eat, just because I wasn't getting enough glucose to the brain. And it really frustrates me that the mainstream, like, autism advocates do ignore this to a huge extent. They completely forget the biological stuff, because they say that it's over-pathologizing autism, but the reality is that certain medical issues do present differently in autistic people, and we need to be aware of that to keep autistic people safe from medical neglect. So I can't look at autism content on TikTok or Instagram anymore, because it's really triggering to me. It reminds me of all the medical neglect I faced and the constant misunderstanding that I faced even from the autism community my entire life. So I just can't anymore. Like, it's very triggering to me. I just feel so misunderstood all the time, even by the community that is supposed to be understanding towards me. I feel like there's a lot of comparison as well, which makes me feel really misunderstood and invalidated, between people who are diagnosed early in life versus people who are late diagnosed. Because I know a lot of people who are late diagnosed who say that the people who are diagnosed early have it so easy, but although I'm lucky to have, like, known that I'm neurodivergent, that didn't erase all of the struggles. And, you know, I'm not denying their experience. It is horrendous to not know what's going on with your brain, not know why you're struggling so much, and be, like, blamed for it your whole life. It's transformative when you realise that it isn't your fault. At the same time, though, I don't think that it's right to imply that people like me who are diagnosed as a kid have no issues. For example, there was an autism advocate who was basically saying that from the constant stress and trauma of not knowing they're autistic, they developed, like, they listed all their trauma symptoms. And the ironic thing is, like, obviously I feel terrible for them that they went through so much misunderstanding because they didn't know they were autistic. But the thing is, they were saying that if they were diagnosed early, a lot of that could have been erased, which may be true for them, definitely. But I also think it's important to note that even being diagnosed as a kid can be traumatic in some ways, because it definitely was for me. I have exactly the same trauma symptoms as they listed, but caused by the opposite, caused by being diagnosed early and having every issue blamed on my autism, leading to a lifetime of being medically neglected, misunderstood, dismissed, and all of that. So I feel like there are issues both sides. I don't think it's right to say that if you're diagnosed early, you must have no issues, because unfortunately it's not always that simple. You know, as I said, I've been diagnosed for 10 years, but when I was a kid, there wasn't really any support. After my diagnosis, my parents were just told to look at the National Autistic Society website, and that was it. 10 years on now, I'm finally looking to see if there's an autism specialist service who may be able to support me, to help me understand myself more, to help me have more independence, to help me just feel better in general. So, you know, even when we're diagnosed as a kid, it doesn't necessarily mean we actually access the support we need. I mean, the best information I had on autism back then made me feel more misunderstood, because the only resources I really had were books, but the books were kind of writing about autism and how it presents in like male toddlers. So that's why I always kind of doubted myself and thought I can't be autistic, because I didn't relate to that. But obviously the reason I didn't relate to that is because I was a teenage girl and not a male toddler. But yeah, as I said, I doubted my autism diagnosis a lot. Between the ages of 14 and 16, I was virtually convinced that I am not autistic. I thought I'd been misdiagnosed. Turns out I haven't been misdiagnosed, I am autistic. But it's just because I wasn't presenting in a very stereotypical way that I assumed it must be something else. And that actually led to a bit of an identity crisis in a way. Like, it shouldn't matter that much, but for some reason I was just desperate to know, like, why is my brain like this then? If it's not autism, what is it? Because I knew I was so different. But it was weird. My autism diagnosis didn't feel like it explained so much, because the only information I had on it at that time was, you know, not for someone like me. It was for toddlers. I really struggle with overwhelm from social situations. Not anxiety, but just like a depleted social battery. If I socialise on one day, I do feel energised a little bit at the time that I'm socialising, if it's with a nice person, because it helps me realise that the world isn't fully evil and that there are some nice people who exist. But like after the social interaction, I have to recover for a long time, and part of that's because I'm chronically ill, but part of it is also just because I'm autistic, and social interaction, I have to use so much energy, like controlling my facial expressions and stuff. Like, I literally after a social interaction have to massage my face because it aches from having to like control my facial expression so much. And yeah, it can be quite tiring, and I get quite irritable. Like, if I'm expected to socialise more than a few days in a row, I can't do it. I literally go into a state of anger, constant anger. Not because I hate people, I'm not a misanthrope, but just because I can't cope with that constant expectation. I need some solitude to recharge. I think anyone does, but especially when you're autistic. Like, I remember when I was in college and I would spend lunchtimes in the library with earbuds in, listening to music, because I was trying to avoid social interaction. And it's obviously not that I hated my friends, I loved them. It was just that I needed some time out so that I could focus in class afterwards. But yeah, as an autistic adult, I would really just describe it as overwhelmed by the demands of daily life, overwhelm in social situations, overwhelm at the expectations put on us. To conclude this, I would say that, you know, being autistic is difficult no matter when you're diagnosed, no matter your age. You know, it doesn't have to always be difficult, but there will be difficulties, and that's something I don't like as well. There's a lot of erasure of the difficulties. Sometimes if you don't constantly talk about autism as a strength, some people in the autism community hate you. They're like, oh, you think it's a tragedy, and it's like, no, but it is difficult. That's kind of why we got the diagnosis in the first place. I hope this video can raise awareness though of, you know, the fact that an autism diagnosis can be fully positive, but of course there are some difficulties as well, like the medical gaslighting, and also I hope that it can give people a sort of idea of what social interaction might feel like for an autistic person. Maybe if you're the parent of an autistic person, maybe your child could relate to how I feel, maybe not, but because we're all different, but it might give you a little bit of insight which might be at least somewhat helpful. So thanks for watching. Bye!